Nintendo just released a new trailer.
Is it for Metroid Prime 4?
No. It's for Breath of the Wild 2.
A new Zelda game?
The Legend of Zelda once again shows that Nintendo loves it most, as it got not one, not two, but 3 games featured at E3 this year. We already knew about 2 of them, so we aren't talking about those. We're talking about the sequel to Breath of the Wild. It's barely a minute long and it tells us so much. So me and my buddy Hombre de Mundo are going to break down everything we learned from this trailer.
That is true. Hello, I am Hombre de Mundo, your one and only man of world, and I'm gonna help out Humilos finding all the little details because he's not particularly good at doing it himself. He's only good at killing Lionels.
Hombre and I used to do podcasts and videos for Zelda Universe, including trailer analysis videos like this one, and we could not pass up the opportunity to examine every detail of something like this. Now, before you watch this analysis, I do recommend checking out the recut trailer I posted on this channel earlier, just so you can get an idea for the most likely sequence of events. We're going to be going over 5 main points today, and we're going to start things off with the setting of the trailer. Hombre, take us away.
Yeah, so as you said, the trailer's a bit out of sequence. There's a lot of flashy events going by, but here's what we are making of it. So, the entire trailer appears to take place in one single location, albeit a pretty big location. It's an underground cave, and it's a bunch of ruins. We see a bridge, some pillars, pools of water, and some drawings on the walls here that are very interesting. Because they actually seem to depict Ganondorf mounted on horseback, leading an army while holding a trident, which of course is his chosen weapon of legend. Now you may be thinking it's a bit too early to say that's definitely Ganondorf, right? But we correctly identified the old woman's voice in the original Breath of the Wild trailer as Impa, based solely on the fact that it was an old woman, because there's only one of those. So if you see a dark, imposing figure holding a horse with long hair and a Gerudo symbol on his armor, you get the idea.
We can also see what is likely the entrance to the cave, but this is not a location we've seen before. Based on Hyrule Castle's rumblings, we're assuming that this cave is below Hyrule Castle somewhere, so the entrance may not be far away. In fact, it's entirely possible that the scene showing Hyrule Castle happens before the rest of the trailer, and that the cave appears and becomes accessible due to the castle rising. There's nothing in the trailer to specifically indicate when that scene happens, so we can't say for sure. The last interesting thing about the cave is the blue glowing stones. We've not seen these before, and coloring is reminiscent of the blue used for Sheikah technology. Perhaps a power source or another material? We're not sure, but hopefully we'll find out.
Yeah, personally, I think they're just aesthetics. But who knows? Well, we have actually more interesting things to talk about, like our main characters, Link and Zelda. The first thing that you should notice is that Zelda's got a haircut, and you should notice that and you should compliment her on it. She wears her champion outfit that's been updated a little bit. She decided for some reason to use Link, out of all people, as a fashion inspiration, as we can see with her new cloak. I mean, all of this, of course, is in line with the ending of the Breath of the Wild, which showed that Link and Zelda would be kind of traveling the world together and going on adventures. What a lot of people hope to see is that Zelda would be playable. Personally, I think that's stupid, but I know a lot of people want it, so hey, we can save that debate for another day.
I am one of those people that does want to see Zelda be a playable character, but I'm not going to hold my breath at seeing that happen. Just the way that I've seen Zelda games go and the way Nintendo usually does things, they'll probably stick with just Link. So as for Link himself, who will definitely be playable, he looks more or less the same as he did in Breath of the Wild, except for one blink and you'll miss it moment, where he appears to be involved with some kind of magic. The magic appears related to the strange hand, which we'll go over that hand a bit more in a minute, and Link appears to be reaching into the magic before it apparently becomes too much for him, and you'll see it just shoot up in the air. We're wondering, is that maybe what unseals Ganondorf in the trailer? Did they do something that kind of ruined the magic seal? We will see. I definitely think that's a good possibility.
Then we get some cool Ganondorf scenes, and I'm really excited for this one because Ganondorf is my favorite character in the franchise, and we haven't seen Ganondorf since Twilight Princess over a decade ago.
And now we see him in his latest incarnation, which is, as you named it, Ganondorf. He's got a lot of malice leaking out of his chest, which you may remember. Malice is that gross reddish purplish stuff that is all over the devastated Hyrule, which is kind of this kind of essence of Ganon's evil, and it hurts you when you walk on it somehow. And a bunch of that's coming out of his chest, which that is significant because his chest is where he was previously stabbed, not just by the Sword of Sages, but also the Master Sword in Twilight Princess. So that could be a hint that this Zelda references the Master Sword traveling through the Twilight. We hear that in Breath of the Wild in the coronation scene for Link.
At the end of Twilight Princess, we don't actually see what happens to Ganondorf. He kind of dies during dubious circumstances. Ganondorf, he just kind of stands there, and that's the last we see of him. He seems kind of dead, but we really don't know what happened there.
It's very possible that it could be related. It may just be a coincidence. We'll find out, but the main case that we need to bring up is that he is sealed here by someone. We don't know who it is, and we know that the seal is currently keeping a lot of malice in check. That seal comes in the form of that hand, which we know because once we do not see that hand in the trailer anymore, over Ganon's chest, the malice just starts exploding out of him.
If we look at Ganondorf himself, obviously he's a corpse. He looks kind of mummified, very similar to how the Omen Ao and the other mummified monks. He kind of has a similar appearance to those at first, like very old, kind of mummified. And we can see the Gerudo symbols on his garb and also the jewelry. We can also see the little forehead jewel that he has. It looks different in this game, but it's definitely a forehead jewel thing. We see a long red hair, which you said looked similar to Twilight Princess. My thoughts went immediately to Hyrule Warriors.
Well, yeah, because he has the same length of hair in Twilight Princess. He just has it neatly braided in Twilight Princess.
You got a point there, yeah. So at one point, we get a look at the kind of former silhouette of Ganon, because there's a flash, and we see the hand is reaching towards Ganondorf as he's kind of looking like he's in pain or something. It's weird, it's spooky, I like it. Not sure what this means. I also speculated that maybe this is some sort of flash that happens before the hand lets go. There's some sort of like reverse, oh, now it's loosening up? I don't know. It's strange. Anyway, what really does matter is that we see the corpse slowly starting to move. And I can only speculate that this happens after Link tampers with the hand or the swirly magic stuff. We see some fingers move. We see the corpse kind of twists around, and he opens his eyes, and he has some creepy cat eyes going on. And also throughout these scenes, if you listen carefully to the audio, you can hear a subtle organ playing Ganondorf's theme. Also in the soundtrack, from the very beginning of this trailer, there is a heartbeat, a slow heartbeat that's subsequently beating faster and faster up until he awakens, basically. So we're definitely looking at what is the resurrection of Ganondorf right here. And it's a little creepy. It's not scenes that we're used to seeing in a Zelda game, but it's very cool. Let's talk about the hand.
That hand is we don't. Here's the thing: is that we don't know whose hand this is. We don't know why it has a spiral of green magic. I have a lot of questions about this thing, but unfortunately, not a lot of answers.
Yeah, I've seen some people. I've seen some people make a connection to Twilight Princess, but I think that's only because it's like light blue swirly stuff that is vaguely reminiscent of Twilight. But to me, the only conclusion I'm willing to draw is that, hey, here's the sealing magic. It's in the form of a hand. Why? I don't know.
See, I do think that there definitely are some Twilight motifs going on here. particularly in the ornaments around the hand, like the orange stuff there. The blue and orange coloring there is very evocative of Midna for me, like in the orange spindlies that she always has, and she did have a hand, I will remind you, she did have a big weird orange hand. But I will also say that people find relations to Twilight Princess in like every Zelda game since Twilight Princess, and they're almost never like they almost never mean anything. Like on the beach in Breath of the Wild, there's a mirror, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, it's the mirror of Twilight," and it's like, nah, that mirror broke. That mirror's gone.
It's just a random mirror on the beach.
Exactly. So it almost never actually means anything. Could it mean something this time? I still think no. But I will just say it still does remind me of Twilight designs.
Regardless, though, the hand clearly has magical properties. It seems to have a controlling force. It's kind of stopping, or at least to some degree containing the malice. Okay, I don't know if I should go into speculation now, or maybe later. I'll do it now, and then we'll see. One thing that someone kind of talked about was that in Breath of the Wild, they talk about Calamity Ganon, how he resurrects every 10,000 years, right? And what is Ganon in Breath of the Wild made of? Well, he's made of malice or smoke or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. What if he doesn't actually resurrect at all? What if it just, when enough malice has leaked out slowly, accumulates over 10,000 years, and then a form of Ganon comes to being?
So this is like Ganon's core, and what was leaked out was just a portion.
Yeah.
Of
so it
his
needs to
evil.
accumulate sufficiently, and when it does, that's when Calamity Ganon happens every 10,000 years. But what we're seeing here is Ganon himself, because if you think to Breath of the Wild, Ganon was not really a person.
That's true.
Ganon was not a person at all. He was described a bit like a storm, like a natural disaster, or he was described as like a raging emotion almost. You know, he wasn't very tangible. But here we see Ganondorf, and it's a body, it's a thing, and stuff is coming out of him. So
I have to wonder how much of that is directly related to people's thoughts about Ganon in Breath of the Wild, because I know many people were disappointed that Ganon wasn't truly a person, but rather just a big monster, just a big force.
I was one of them, yeah.
And I wonder if Nintendo heard those complaints, because we do know that the Zelda developers specifically, they often do base their next game on the feedback of the previous one. So maybe they're like, people wanted to see real Ganon. Well, let's put real Ganon in then to make up for it.
It feels in this game they're really going to go for a proper, in air quotes, story, a more traditional storyline. What we're seeing now is the starting point. This is what starts the game off. In the beginning, they go explore this thing, Ganondorf wakes up, and then just all hell breaks loose, right? That's usually how it goes. But so let's go back to the hand a bit here, because what we see is that once Ganoncorpse awakens, the floor starts breaking, Zelda begins to fall. Now, at one point, we see Link reaching and grabbing Zelda's hand. That could be directly related to that. And then at another point, we see that the magic ghost hand grabs Link's hand. So what I'm thinking is that Link is kind of hanging on, reaching for Zelda. And then maybe as he's about to fall or something, Ghost Hand reaches out and grabs Link.
Which that makes you ask the question, do you think that the Ghost Hand's doing that because someone's controlling Ghost Hand, or do you think Ghost Hand is thinking on its own?
So I have two speculations about this. Number one is that yes, the Ghost Hand is either part of a complete ghost that we don't see, or it's a thing that someone's controlling. It could be helping him out because, those are obviously the good guys, let me help them out. Or it could also be because Link does touch the swirly things and his arm gets all ghosty, and maybe that kind of creates a connection between Link and the Ghost Hand. And the Ghost Hand and Link's hand having a bond is sort of interesting. Because if you look back at some of the concept art for Breath of the Wild, you'll see that there was an idea at some point to have Link with only one arm, and one arm being like a machine magic arm that can transform into different things to help him use items. So maybe that's something that will happen in this game. It's not uncommon for Zelda games to introduce elements that were thought up in the design process of previous games and then scrapped. They like to do this. They like to go back and revisit old ideas and bring them onto new games. So we might well see a ghost hand kind of becoming Link's hand, and he might use that to use items instead of the Sheikah Slate. Or maybe he'll have entirely new abilities, like maybe he can do spells, maybe he can interact with ghost thingies.
Personally, I think the Ghost Hand is going to be some sort of partner, similar to Navi or Midna, someone who's there the entire quest to help you do certain additional things that you wouldn't normally do otherwise. I do think it's, like you were saying, it could be additional abilities like the Sheikah Slate that it could introduce, because, you know, obviously we already had Magnesis and Cryonis and all that. I personally hope they come back, but I hope they come back in addition to some additional abilities, which this Ghost Hand could very well provide. One thing I have not seen anyone talking about on the internet yet, and if you've already talked about this, I'm sorry, but I have not read your posts, but no one's talking about the fact that this is a Ghost Hand, and like what that means for the Zelda series. Because Ghost Hands are not a new concept, I will remind you. We've had Ghost Hands since Majora's Mask, and they've been very vital parts of the story that require you to give them toilet paper as they reach out from a toilet. Is this the one and the same Ghost Hand that was seen in Majora's Mask and in Skyward Sword and in the Oracle of Seasons? Just saying. It's too much of a coincidence to not point out, and that could play a big part in the game. At the very least, I do hope we get like a joke calling back to that. If this Ghost Hand sticks through the whole game, which I think it will. I think this has a very significant spot in the story, no matter what role it serves. I think it is a big part of the game. So I do hope that I hope they make some kind of callback to that in some way. They have to.
I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Okay, so I'd like to move on to the overworld now, because the last scene of the trailer, which we talked about a bit in the beginning, is Hyrule Castle racing up from the ground. Now I would say it's kind of likely that this happens before anything else in the trailer. That Hyrule Castle rises up, and there's a passageway that leads into the underground where Ganondorf is. This would explain why Hyrule Castle is the location where Calamity Ganon enters the world, right? That would explain why those huge stones surround Hyrule Castle. In Breath of the Wild, you see those huge stones that kind of get raised up to contain Ganon. I would assume that those stones aren't very portable because they're huge. So probably he appears from the castle every time. And if so, it would make sense that the origin of the malice is directly beneath the castle. However, it's also likely, I don't know likely, but I will say, however, it's also possible that this happens after everything. Because we do have the question of the overworld. I mean, are we going to play in the exact same Hyrule as in the first Breath of the Wild? Probably not, because then they would just make this a DLC storyline or something like that. So it could be that the castle takes off and goes to another kingdom that has some sort of story connection to either Ganondorf or the Hand. It's also possible that the castle will just hover in the sky, unleash a bunch of malice or earthquakes or something that just completely devastates Hyrule, so that we'll have a similar yet fairly different overworld to explore.
I mean, there's a lot of options there. I definitely don't think we're going to be going through the same locations we saw in Breath of the Wild, because, I don't know, I can't think of a way that they can make that interesting without, like you said, without drastically changing up the map, doing something different there. And there's also like some weird omissions from the map, such as mainly one, there's no towers anywhere on this map whatsoever.
Yeah, we don't see the Divine Beasts either.
Now, the towers could, of course, recede. The Divine Beasts can wander around. They could do anything else. But that is one of the things that's making me think, well, maybe this doesn't take place in Hyrule then. Maybe it takes place, like, at least Overworld Hyrule. Maybe it takes place elsewhere. And One thing that I'm personally leaning towards is this game being more cave focused, because that was something that we didn't have at all in Breath of the Wild. There were no caverns, there were no caves to explore. There was none of that. It's just the entirety of the overworld. Then you have the shrines, and then you have the divine beasts. Those were your locations. I think there's a reason to believe that that could very well be the case. And first and foremost is going back to the setting. This whole trailer took place inside a cave. Something that we didn't see at all in Breath of the Wild is having so much focus in this trailer. I really think it's possible that while the entire game may not take place underground, which I'm not ruling that out either, you can at least enter underground labyrinths from different points, which would be a great callback to the original game, where you're going into the underworld, as they call it. But we also have one more piece of evidence about the fact that caves will play a bigger part, and that is rats. There were rats animated in this trailer. We didn't have any rats in Breath of the Wild. There's rats in this game. And while that may seem like entirely mundane, rats have always been a big part of Zelda games. They've been a big part of the underground, specifically in caves and such. And if there's new animals like rats, because I'm assuming those rats aren't enemies. They didn't look like enemy rats. If there's new animals, that means there's new enemies. And if there's new enemies in an underworld, that opens up a lot of monsters that we didn't see in Breath of the Wild. Will things like Dark Nuts exist? Will Lionels finally have a break from my wrath while I kill all the Dark Nuts in the world? Well, I absolutely hope so. Dark Nuts were like my biggest wish in Breath of the Wild, the one thing it didn't have that I wanted. And we can assume a lot of content will return, Majora's Mask style, which would greatly speed up development if so. But I hope to see a lot of new stuff as well. Obviously, we'll see a bunch of new stuff. And one of those new things is caves and cave enemies. I don't know, you want to see that come in?
Yeah, I think that would be cool. I would like to see something, like you mentioned, a more seamless transition between overworld, underground, and dungeon. And I would like the dungeons to take place mostly, but not all of them, underground, with some unique enemies that would fit in the underground. Not just underground bokoblins and underground Lysalphos, but like you said, Dark Nuts, monster rats.
We need some likes up in there. We need some...
Yeah, I miss likes a lot in Breath of the Wild. So likes. How about what about wall masters?
Oh heck yeah! We already got a hand, so like it would fit perfect. We can have all sorts of wall masters. There are a lot of options that we could do with that. And
yes,
the funny thing is if we look back at ever since Wind Waker, okay, fans have been very vocal about saying what they hate about Zelda games, and it's insane. Any Zelda fan is like the first person to tell you everything wrong with the series. We're very weird fans. So in Wind Waker, they're all like, this game's too cartoony, make it realistic and give me a horse again. And so they're like, all right, fine, here's Twilight Princess. And then they played Twilight Princess and they're like, this game's overworld is too boring, give me more things to do. And so they made Skyward Sword, which was nothing but things to do. And they're like, this game's too linear, and I didn't get to explore as much as I wanted. Give me more world. And so they made Breath of the Wild. And then everyone's like, this game doesn't have enough dungeons. So I think Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be nothing but dungeons. That is what I expect.
Yeah, it's just a dungeon crawler.
Exactly.
Yeah. I had someone speculate that this game would take place entirely underground, but I doubt it. And I doubt it for the following reason. A big part of Breath of the Wild was being able to climb up to a high point, looking out over the horizon, seeing something, be like, hey, I want to go over here, and you go over there. That kind of thing is going to be completely lost if you're in caves. Unless they go like Hollow Earth on us, Hollow Hyrule, that might work. But I would like to see something more of a transition. You know, partly above ground and some parts below ground. And hopefully it would be a thing where going below ground is supposed to be a bit scary. It's supposed to be a bit more dangerous, more traps, more stronger enemies, these sorts of things. Whereas the overworld, that's where you kind of do your exploring and you have a bit of a breather. Finally, you know, I'm so excited that we're seeing, you know, by every sign points to the resurrection of Ganondorf the man, Ganondorf the character, which I'm super excited about. And I'm for the next however long, I'm just gonna be like, please don't screw this up, Nintendo. Please do not tease me like this and then take my favorite villain away in some sort of stupid sense. But I think this trailer's got a lot of people excited, a lot of people pumped. If we're lucky, we might be looking at an 18-month timeline till release. If we're lucky. I kind of expect it to be delayed another year maybe, and I'm fine with that. Because Breath of the Wild still feels kind of fresh. You know, it came out just over 2 years ago. That's not a long time at all. And then we had DLC to hold us over. I wouldn't mind waiting 2 years from now, or 2.5.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I think it's going to be nice and quick is just because I expect there to be a lot of asset swapping. I expect it to be a Majora's Mask situation where Majora's Mask came out 2 years after Ocarina of Time because they just said, well, we already have the models, let's just do some cleaning, make a new map, we're good to go. And obviously there was more to it than that because they still made a really fresh feeling game. Like Majora's Mask didn't feel like Ocarina of Time. It felt like a brand new game, but despite using so many things. That's what I'm hoping for with this, is that they'll be able to make it quick, they'll be able to make it new, they'll be able to make it fresh, they can recycle a bunch of assets to speed along production, and we'll have a Zelda game in less than the usual 3 to 5 year wait from announcement.
You'll also have to kind of take into account that even though Breath of the Wild released in early 2017, all the important development was done way before, because they decided to port it for the launch of the Switch. It probably could have released holiday 2016 if it was Wii U only, maybe even a bit sooner than that. So they've had time to look over things that they wanted to do. They've had a lot of time to gather in feedback, and I don't know. It's looking promising.
Definitely is.
Looking
I'm
very
way excited
promising
for it.
so
I
far.
can't wait for this to come out. Obviously, I've got some good Zelda things to tide me over. I'm way excited for Link's Awakening, but good heavens, this is just beautiful thing to have been announced. I am excited that this is happening. So, Hombre, thank you for coming onto the show.
Hey man, no worries. I hope that all of you have found this just as interesting as we have. If we have missed any little detail in the trailer, definitely let us know. But I think we got most of it covered.
If we have another trailer come out, you can expect to hear from both of us again to talk more about that one. But until then, enjoy the rest of E3, enjoy speculating about Zelda, enjoy the additional Zelda games coming out here in the near future, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye!
Bye.